Pat Casey had a billy goat. He gave the name of Seamus because it was, the neighbors said, a national disgrace. And sure enough, that animal was eminently famous for masticating every rag of laundry round the place. From skirts to shirts, prodigiously he proved his powers of chewing. The question of digestion seemed to matter not at all. But you will agree, I think, with me, his limits of misdoing was reached the day he swallowed Mrs. Rooney's old red shawl. Now, Mrs. Annie Rooney was a winsome widow woman, and many a bouncing boy had sought to make her change her name. And living just across the way, it was surely only human a lonesome man like Casey would be wishfully the same. So, every Sunday, shaved and shined, he'd take the fine occasion to call upon the lady, and she'd take his hat and coat. And supping tea, it seemed that she might yield to his persuasion, but alas, he hadn't counted on that devastating goat. For Seamus loved his master with a deep and dumb devotion, and everywhere that Casey went, the goat would want to go. And though I cannot analyze a quadruped's emotion, they say the beast was jealous, and I reckon it was so. For every time that Casey went to call on Mrs. Mooney, beside the gate the goat would wait with woefulness intense, until one day it chanced they were fast becoming spoony, when Seamus spied that old red shawl aflutter on the fence. Now Mrs. Mooney loved that shawl beyond all rhyme or reason. Maybe 'twas an heirloom or a cherished souvenir, for judging by the way she wore it season after season, you'd think it was as precious as a product of cashmere. So Seamus strolls toward it, and no doubt the colour pleased him, for he biffed it and sniffed it as most any goat might do. Then his melancholy left him, as a sense of hunger seized him, and he wagged his tail with rapture as he started in to chew. "Begorra, you're a daisy," said the doting Mr. Casey to the blushing widow woman as they parted at the door. "With your tenderness and teasing, sure, you've set me heart a-blazing, and I dread the day I'll never see me Annie any more." "Ah, go on now with your blarney," said the widow, softly sighing, and she went to pull his whiskers when dismay her bosom smote. The old red shawl, 'twas missing where she'd left it bravely drying. Then she saw it disappearing down the neck of Casey's goat. Fiercely flamed her Irish temper. "Look," says she, "the thieving devil! Sure he's made me shawl his supper. Well, I hope it's to his taste. And excuse me, Mr. Casey, if I seem to be uncivil, for I'll never wed a man with such a misbegotten beast." She slammed the door and left him in a state of consternation, and he couldn't understand it till he spied that grinning goat. Then, with eloquence, he cussed it, and his final fulmination was a poem of profanity impossible to quote. So, blasting goats in petticoats, and feeling downright sinful, despairfully he wandered into Shinnigan's shebeen, and straightway he proceeded to absorb a mighty skinful of the deadliest variety of Shinnigan's poteen.
Wow.
And when he started homeward, it was early in the morning, and Seamus followed faithfully a yard behind his back. And suddenly, Casey stumbled, and without the slightest warning, like a lump of lead, he tumbled right across the railway track. And there he lay, serenely, and defied the powers to budge him, reposing like a baby with his head upon the rail. But Seamus seemed unhappy, and from time to time would nudge him, though his prods of protestation were without the least avail. Then, to that goatish mind, perhaps a sense of fell disaster came stealing like a spectre in the dim and dreary dawn. for his bleats of warning blended with the snorings of his master in a chorus of calamity. But Casey slumbered on. But oh, the goat was troubled, for his efforts were redoubled. Now he nibbled at his whisker, now he nibbled at his ear, now he shook him by the shoulder, and with fear becoming bolder, Seamus bellowed like a foghorn. But the sleeper would not hear. Then up and down the railway line he scampers for assistance, and anxiously he hurries back and sought with tug and strain to pull his master from the track, when sudden, in the distance, he heard the roar and rumble of a fast approaching train. Did Seamus faint and falter? No. He stood there stark and splendid. True, his tummy was distended, but he gave his horns a toss. By them, his goathood's honor would be gallantly defended. And if their valor failed him, he would perish with his boss. So dauntlessly, he lowered his head, and ever clearer, clearer, he heard the throb and thunder of the Continental Mail. He would face that mighty monster. It was coming nearer, nearer. He would fight it. He would smite it. And he'd never show his tail. Can you see that hirsute hero standing there in tragic glory? Can you hear the Pullman porters shrieking horror to the skies? No, you can't, because my story has no end so grim and gory. Seamus did not perish. His master did not die. Why, at this very present moment, Casey swaggers hale and hearty, and Seamus strolls beside him with a bright bell at his throat, while the recent Mrs. Mooney, she's the gayest of the party, for now she's Mrs. Casey, and she's crazy for the goat. You're wondering what happened? Well, you know, the truth is stranger than the wildest brand of fiction. So I'll tell you without shame. There was Seamus and his master in the face of grave disaster, and a giant locomotive coming down in smoke and flame. What power on earth could save them? Yet, golden inspiration to gods and goats alike may come. So, in that brutish brain, a thought was born. The old red shawl, then, rearing with elation, like lightning, Seamus threw it up and flagged and stopped the train.